Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Concentric Podcast. I'm Geek Gumshoe, a retired police detective, filmmaker, and pinup and cosplay photographer.
I'm DL Memphis, a singer, award-winning pinup model, and award-winning cosplayer.
Concentric is our take on all things related to fandom conventions
and the lifestyles they inspire.
Welcome to episode 2 of Concentric Podcast. I hope you caught our last episode where we did our review of the Texas Frightmare Weekend. Like any good addiction, cons and cosplay have to have a starting point. There has to be that first experience that gets all of us hooked. So for today's episode, we want to talk a little bit about our first con experience. It was 10 years ago, maybe more.
2013 and
10 years ago, yeah.
Yeah, 2013, and we were in New Orleans at our very first con, which happened to be Wizard World. So we kind of started off with a bang.
We jumped right into it with both feet. Let me tell the story that leads up to how this happened. It was such a crazy experience. So DL and I went on a cruise that sailed out of New Orleans. We got back on a Saturday, and we were staying in a hotel in the Warehouse District. And the hotel was right across the street from this restaurant that had been on a couple of Food Network shows. And we were really wanting to go try this place out. So Sunday morning, we got up and we were going to catch the train to come back home. So we had a little bit of time to go get something to eat and get everything together before time to be at the train station. So we went to this place called Mother's. It's a little po' boy shop out in the Warehouse District. And
Best
so
food.
Yeah, it really is amazing food. If you're in New Orleans, go look for Mother's. So we went there to eat. It was kind of a brunch type thing where I think it was about 11 o'clock in the morning or so, because we had to be at the train station at 1 o'clock in the afternoon to get our train back home. So we were sitting there at our table, and there was a giant window on one end of the dining room, and DL was sitting with her back to the window and I was facing the window. And I must have had this really strange look on my face at one time, because she kind of looked at her, she's like, "What?" And she turned around and looked out the window. I said, "An Imperial Stormtrooper just walked by that window."
Okay, so wait a minute. But this is New Orleans.
It is New Orleans. You never know.
Anything is possible. Anything.
Yeah, and that's really kind of what we wrote it off with at first, is we are in New Orleans. There is no telling what you're going to see. But within a minute or so, there was another one. And then somebody else came by, and I think they were dressed as a Jedi or something. And by this point, I was interested. I was staring out the window. I couldn't even pay attention to the conversation going on at the table anymore, because every few minutes there was somebody walking by the window. So we knew there had to be something going on in town. So at this point in our lives, we had been watching all of the hullabaloo about the San Diego Comic-Con, and
Travel Channel was a thing.
Yeah, and they were really, every year they had this big thing about the con, and we knew that there was just no way we were going to make it out. With the jobs that we were working at the time, we just did not have the expendable money to take a trip to California to go to a nerd convention and watch a bunch of people run around dressed in comic book clothes. So
who knew?
Yeah. When we started seeing all these people running around, of course, we had no idea what was going on. And we started poking around, and in true New Orleans fashion, we came across a poster plastered on a light pole that said Wizard World Comic Con. And it had the location, which was not far. It was in the Warehouse District, so it wasn't far from where we were staying.
It was at the main convention center, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was at the convention center. But the problem was we were 2 hours from a train ride back home, and we couldn't just, bebop over there and go check out this con. And we knew that we weren't going to be able to make it. So what we did was we said, "Hey, let's get back home. We'll look this up online. We'll see if there's another one of these events or whatever, and then we'll see when it's going to be." Now, the thing you have to keep in mind is at that point, Wizard World was really just kind of digging their feet in. I think they were putting cons on in maybe 4 cities.
Yes.
It was like New Orleans, Chicago, Portland of all places, and like one other city, maybe like New York or something. And that was really all they had. So New Orleans was the one shot thought we had. And so we went back home, we started watching it. And at the time, they would only promote whichever con was immediately coming up next. They had a single page on Facebook that would show whatever con was happening next. So we kept having to wait and wait and wait. And then finally, one day we saw they were coming back to New Orleans that next January. And we decided we were going to absolutely make that happen. It became a goal. We started saving money, and we were absolutely determined that we were going to be there for that next Wizard World New Orleans.
In costume, or at least
somebody.
Actually, I recall that there was some debate going back and forth whether or not, because I remember initially the conversation was, it's like, oh, well, what if you get there and you're in costume and you don't want to be in costume? So there was a debate, believe it or not, going back and forth whether or not I wanted to be in cosplay.
We were going to be taking both of our kids with us. Our youngest kid at the time was probably, what do you think? She was 5?
She was younger. She was probably like 4.
4 or 5.
Yeah.
The oldest was a teenager at that point. They both wanted to cosplay. And so DL and both of the kids started building cosplays, getting ready for this con that was probably 5-6 months out by the time we got it scheduled and realized we were going to be able to go.
Can I talk about the cosplays now?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
This is kind of your thing. So, do your cosplay thing. Do the thing.
Do the thing that I do.
The thing you do.
I just want to start. When I encounter other cosplayers, especially new cosplayers, most of the time they start out thinking, hey, I want to go do this and I want to be in costume. But they don't know where to start. They don't know how to start creating that look and everything. And so they start with something that they probably got in their closet or something that they picked up at some Halloween supply store.
I think most cosplayers, when they're first dipping their toe in the water, are probably looking at just a standard store-bought costume thing that, they hear there's a con coming up and they want to go try it. So they go and they buy a cheap costume and go into it. But DL's never really been that way. She goes full in on this stuff.
I am a Wonder Woman fan. Most people who know me probably know me now through Ice Cream Queens or just kind of being out and about in the horror world. And I do love everything that's gory and horror. But I will go on to say that one of my first loves and one of my true loves has always been women of DC. I grew up watching Wonder Woman and I grew up watching Catwoman, Batgirl. And so these are characters that are true to my heart. And yes, I am. Oh, God, let me stand up. Yep. I'm in Wonder Woman gear today. That's a nice little boob shot, wasn't it? So when
get the viewership up.
I know, boobs. No, but there's no the next picture will probably. So when I took on my first cosplay, the only thing that came to mind was I would love to be Catwoman, but that would be intimidating. And that's going to come many, many years later, which is still intimidating as hell. My first go-to was Wonder Woman. And I grew up watching the animated the animated cartoon, Super Friends. I'm drawing a blank. Super Friends. It's also the end of the day. It's been a long day. But also the Linda Carter version. So the conversation was, are you going to wear the big giant star-spangled bathing suit? I'm like, no, I'm not. I saw a version of Wonder Woman that I would like to attempt to do. So let's get all of the leather.
Let's start small. Let's not get in over our heads. Let's start really small with no, that's not DL style. No.
Let's show the photo so people can see.
So this was the cosplay that DL built for her very first cosplay appearance at a con.
I had a lot of help with this. Okay, so if you are looking at this, you can basically kind of see what I'm talking about, but I'm going to go ahead and tell you. This is a more primitive gladiator version of Wonder Woman. There's another photo that actually shows the entire outfit, but I'm going to walk you through the process. There is a gladiator skirt that is made of pleather because leather was expensive and I didn't know how to dye leather then. There was a very primitive chest piece that was made over to go on a red corset. I have shoulder pads. I have these big giant shoulder pads, a star-spangled cape, and the cheapest tiara that I could find that's backed in something red. There's gladiator boots with it. Let
me jump in on something here. So it's not just shoulder pads; it's articulated shoulder pads. They're built almost like armor in that they're jointed so that it moves. So not only did DL decide she wanted to build this leather warrior's armor, that it also had to have some functionality to it. This was where some of my leather skills came in when it came to putting in rivets and such to make this armor, these armored shoulder pads move and give mobility and such. So it was a family effort to be sure, but this was what she decided she wanted to dive in with.
That is absolutely hysterical too. I'm dying. If you can show the full length picture, I would love to show that one as well.
So here's another look at DL with a couple of other cosplayers.
So obviously Wonder Woman was a very popular character. She still is a very popular character. This is a photo of myself as Wonder Woman and more this gladiator build. By the way, yes, those are leg greaves. We built leg greaves to go with this. And it wasn't horribly uncomfortable, by the way. I just want to go and say that. But as we mentioned, you do have cosplayers who are going to have more of the store-bought version, which was to my left, and then to my right was more of a comic book version of her in pants and everything. But you had the little lingerie version of her she was kind of fun and she was kind of cute too. So
before we talk too much though about all of the cosplayers and such that were there, there's something that we have to address. For starters, we planned on this for several months in advance, and we drove to New Orleans. Normally we would take the train, but because we were bringing both kids with us and a bunch of cosplay stuff, we drove to New Orleans. We arrived at the conference center for the con, and there has become a ritual.
Is this what you tell on me?
This is what I'm telling you. There's a ritual that we do whenever we arrive at a con. DL says the same exact thing every time. What is it?
I'm not getting out of the car until I see someone else in cosplay.
She has this momentary freak out every time we arrive at a con.
Crippling anxiety.
It really is. And she is convinced that nobody else at this con is going to be in cosplay, and she's going to look like a fool walking up as the only person dressed up. Not that anybody would care that she's the only one, but she has this little anxiety meltdown every time we show up for something like that.
I'm not as bad anymore going into like a traditional con. However, if I'm going into an environment that I've never been in before, yes, I'm going to be like that. And that has something to do with being that extroverted introvert. It's like I like to stand out and I like to be very visual, but I don't want to be the only idiot there dressed up. It's, the whole scene from Legally Blonde where Elle shows up at the party in the bunny outfit. That is the most horrifying experience that I can dream of. I'm like, I'm the only one there dressed in some stupid outfit with some big cottontail stuck to my ass, and now I don't know what to do. I'm like, that is
you have really thought this out.
It is crippling anxiety. And honestly, if anybody else deals with that type of crippling anxiety, please let me know. I cannot be the only person who's like, I'm not going to get out of the car.
I feel like we could do an entire episode just about cosplay anxiety and the people that will show up at an event. And I wonder how many people don't even get out of the car sometimes because they pull up and they overthink it. And the next thing you know, they're putting that car in reverse and they're getting out of the parking lot and going back home.
Oh, okay. So, we mentioned that Wizard World was one of the larger cons out on the circuit at the time.
It was kind of the only like traveling con at the time.
Other than, you did have, now there were small town cons and hometown cons, and there were quite a few of those here in Memphis. We just didn't really know about it. This is kind of a little bit before we established our con family and kind of figured out that environment was definitely for us.
Back then, you had to know where to look for that stuff. It wasn't all over social media. Social media in 2013 was very fresh. The strong advertising on social media still was not a thing.
Well, kind of to get back to the point that we were discussing about driving away, if I would have paid the money that I did to go to Wizard World, we would have gone in if I would have felt like an absolute idiot. We would have been like shucking off clothes because I always have spare clothes. I have learned that over the years that you carry a spare outfit or two because eventually you're going to get tired of wearing whatever cosplay you're wearing. That was the only cosplay that I've ever worn that had sensible shoes and I could wear it all day long. But most of the time I'm
sandals, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was gladiator sandals and they were flat. And that is so not what I normally go to.
Of course, DL's 5 foot nothing, so as an Amazon
I am the shortest Amazon ever.
Wearing sandals, not the most imposing character out there.
Not at all, not at all. Paying the price for those tickets, and it's been so long ago, I have no earthly idea how much it was per ticket versus paying the price that it would be to go to like a local con, which was less than half price most of the time, there would be a huge difference in driving away and not going in. But that was one of those. We had bought 4 tickets. Yes, at least one of them was a child's pass, but it was a more expensive ticket to get into. So yeah, one way or another, we were going in, even if I was mortified.
I will say this though, in 2013, Wizard World was not as expensive and as mercenary as they got in their later years, which kind of led to, I want to say their demise, because they're still out there, but they've changed names. I think they merged with another company because the Wizard World brand was kind of becoming a bit burdensome because their reputation had kind of gotten a little sullied because of their mercenary ways. But it was not as expensive. They were still very new to the game when it came to these traveling cons. So they put a little bit more thought into them. Within the first couple of years that we discovered them, they learned how to cheap out. Going back to our discussion of our first con, it was an extremely positive experience because they had not gotten to that point yet.
At that stage, Wizard World was still focused on the fan experience, not so much the income.
DL comes in her Wonder Woman Gladiator. Our youngest daughter had a little pink Batgirl outfit. It was a store-bought costume, and man, she was proud of it.
Oh, she was.
Our oldest daughter did kind of a mashup. She had a store-bought.
It was supposed to be the American Dream.
American Dream. It was the female version of Captain America. She took that store-bought costume and we weathered it a little bit. She added some pieces. We found a Vietnam era helmet that I had in the attic for a decade or more. And I dug that out, cleaned it up, painted it blue, painted the A on the front of it. The Captain America movie had just come out not that long before. And so we kind of built a American Dream version of the first Avenger Captain America cosplay for her. And she was really proud of that.
Okay, here's a full length shot. I mean, as you can see, this is actually a really cool design. And considering that she was probably in like 10th grade at the time.
Yeah, she was early high school.
She had a design in mind of what she wanted to do. And for her first cosplay, this is phenomenal.
Yeah, she did a really good job. And this is where the entrance into the con becomes point of discussion as we talk about this subject. We're out of the car. DL has decided she's going to go in.
I don't know that I had another option, but yeah, I'm going to go in now. I've decided.
You guys have no idea. It was a drama. There was a lot to convincing her that she needed to go in. So we got everybody out of the car and geared up, and our oldest daughter was chomping at the bit to go in. She had no hesitation at all. She was ready to go. The youngest was kind of with her mom. She wasn't really sure about it, but once she got the costume on and started running around the parking lot, she was feeling a lot more confident and was ready to go. And we got to the door of the con and we started seeing all of these cosplayers that were lining up and walking across. And immediately the addiction to cosplay started for DL. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
What happened as soon as we rolled up?
I had people immediately approaching me, wanting to take photos of me, photos with me. It was just an amazing experience. As a person who has a tendency to be a bit introverted, yes, I'm used to photography. I've done pinup modeling for years as well, but doing that in front of people and having people react so strongly to a costume or a cosplay that you've built is just an amazing experience. And it does give you a sense of celebrity. And I know I kind of used that in the first episode, but that's the best way that I can think to describe it. Somebody walks up and they start telling you how much they appreciate the character that you love, that they appreciate the design that you've built, and especially if it's a unique design.
If it's not something that you've seen in a movie or something else, if you created this thing kind of on your own and people come up and start saying, that's amazing, it really just escalates that feeling of accomplishment, I think.
And I want to point out that everybody now is used to this gladiator version of Wonder Woman that was introduced more mainstream with Gal Gadot's character in the new Justice League and Wonder Woman movies. But at that time, the gladiator version was still a bit, I don't want to say unknown, because, I obviously saw it and fell in love with the design. I think I had seen the character on Smallville, and then I've seen like her in more comic book settings. But she was not, that version of her was not everything that you saw. It was still basically the Star Spangled Bathing Suit of some. I don't think we saw another version of that while
No,
we were there.
not like that. There were so many other characters, and of course, this was well before the Gal Gadot movie came out. Which, in doing so, that movie created a whole new look for Wonder Woman cosplayers,
Hmm.
and I think that was part of the fun of looking back on this first experience because we didn't have that to pull from. We had the comic book lore, we had the TV show, and a couple of made for TV movies and such. We did not have this new modern version of the character to pull from. People were reaching into all kinds of different sources to create the cosplays that they brought. And so there weren't a bunch of people wearing the same outfit
Hmm.
even though they were cosplaying the same character. And there's a lot to be said for not having something recent to pull from with that, because I think it really made people become more creative when it came to putting those cosplays together.
I mean, these really were leaning into more of the store-bought Halloween version, just because that was not. I mean, if you were building Wonder Woman, you pretty much had to build it from the ground up, unless you went and bought it.
And don't take that the wrong way. We're not
No, no, no,
criticizing
no.
cosplayers that go out and buy a costume. Not
Stupid.
everybody has the time and the skill and the creativity to come up with something new. That just happened to be DL's thing. She wanted to do this character, but she wanted to do it her way. A lot of people just want to cosplay.
Oh
And
yeah.
they realize they don't have the skill to sew something. They don't have the creativity to come up with a whole new approach to it. They'll go to the store, they'll buy a costume, and more power to them. I love people that come out in whatever cosplay they want to come out in. Just have fun with it. That's really what this is about. And when we showed up at this con, never having been to anything like that before, that feeling was so present.
It was powerful.
It really was. We walked through the door. We always joke about this, that we walked through the front door and angels sang, and it was like, oh, my people. And we
Yeah.
realized that we were among very similar minded people. There was no judgment. Nobody was walking around giving each other the stink eye because they were there in a costume or something. And it was just such a neat experience to be there with people that came there for the same purpose that we were there for. We didn't know what to expect because we'd never been to anything like this before. Even we had never even been to a local con, because at this point we
No.
didn't know they existed. So we walked in and immediately felt like we were surrounded by our people.
And that was the feeling. I think it was because a lot of people in this community are always kind of searching for their family and their
Mhm.
people that they belong to. And I'll be the first to tell you, in the quote real world where I work, I'm pretty much known as being the eccentric, the weird one. I'm the one who has all of these bizarre activities that I do on the weekend that a lot of people don't always understand, and sometimes I have to explain that away. When you walk into an environment like this and all of a sudden it's all of those people that share your same interest, whether it's reading reading the comic books, whether it is watching the movies or dressing up in cosplay, it's a feeling of belonging and acceptance that nerds and geeks, we don't always get, because we are so busy sometimes explaining our hobbies and why we do it to the quote adults in the office,
Trying
that
to convince the normies that,
it's normal. Yeah.
it's actually fun to go dress up as a comic book character. And they're looking at you like, okay, whatever,
Well, and that's,
weirdo.
and Comic Cons and cosplay is becoming more and more mainstream. So I think that there's a lot of people
Mhm.
who have come to the realization that sometimes living in the real world is not so fun. And being a comic book character is a lot more fun than being my everyday person that I am. So I do want to comment. You kind of were talking about cosplayers who build their cosplay versus buy cosplay and commission cosplay. I do want to go out and say, yes, I love and do all three. When you hear me talk about building cosplays, please do not take that as a jab, because over the years, I've discovered that there's aspects of it that I love to sew and I love to create. There are people out there who have impeccable skills that are much better than I am. And if I can commission a piece from somebody to create a character that I love, by God, I'm going to do it. If I can reach into my closet and pull something together, because believe it or not, that happens. Who knew that? I dress like a comic book character every day. I don't have a standard go-to when it comes to creating cosplay. I just do what feels comfortable to me and allows me to bring the character to life.
Yeah, DL's got a stock of costumes and costume pieces that she's built up over the years. And it's always interesting for me to watch if she has discovered something new, like a new version of a character or a new character. So we go back to Wizard World New Orleans. And so we're walking around this con floor and we're starting to have this experience. Every few feet, someone is stopping her or one of the kids wanting to take a picture. Of course, I'm the con handler at this point. I started to realize that, and guys, if you have a cosplayer in your family, you probably experienced this before too. Somebody's got to hold the stuff while the pictures are taken.
Yep.
So I kept finding somebody stop. Can I take a picture with you? And DL would turn around, hand me a pile of stuff, and I'm standing here like this, with my arms loaded up with. And I got to the point where I was like, oh, I'll just carry it, because I knew that every 5 feet someone was going to stop and want to take a picture of either her or one of the girls. But it was fun to watch. Our oldest daughter, especially, she got to a point where you could not knock the smile off of her face with a brick. Mm-mm. She was having so much fun, and that Captain America cosplay was getting so much attention, and she was living her best life at this point, and she definitely got that bug at the same time.
So we have a Captain America cosplayer that we know very well. Mm-hmm. Captain America Nashville. Was this the first time she met him?
No, we didn't. We met Tim in Nashville at a con. There was a cosplayer, and in fact, I may have a picture on here with this guy. There was a Captain America cosplayer that was there that saw her and latched on to her. But I think the con that we went to where we met Tim was shortly after this.
Okay.
Because I think she was wearing that same cosplay when she met him. Well, that's Captain Nola there.
That's pretty awesome too. That's
that's a cool cosplay. We were in New Orleans, so this guy kind of played on that Saints theme and built his cosplay around that. But even the youngest had a good that guy right there.
Okay. I mean, it was a lot of fun, and the oldest child really enjoyed it. And by the time she had finished with that event, she already had like designs in mind of what she was wanting to do next. I will comment, you were talking about that helmet. That helmet became almost like a central piece for not the following cosplays, but when we would visit cons, it went with her everywhere. So if there was a Captain America artist on site, she would get them to sign. As a matter of fact, it is signed by Stan Lee right across the A.
That timing worked out really well. Yeah, she had that helmet, and even if she wasn't in Captain America cosplay, she started bringing it with her because we would see that there was a Captain America comic book artist going to be there, and she would bring it along and get it signed. And now it sits in a glass case so that all those autographs that are on the helmet are protected. And I think the only thing that we really want to try to do is if we ever go to a con where Chris Evans is going to be there to get him and kind of come full circle with that.
Well, and it's amazing because I think that although Stan Lee wasn't at that con in particular, his reaction to that helmet solidified what she was doing was correct, because she said that he when she went up and got his signature on it, that he had the biggest grin on his face, because I mean, just to realize that somebody had put the effort. And this young person, this young girl had put this effort into building this prop. She
had one artist, and we never seemed to be able to get his name right. And one of the artists for one of the most iconic covers in the Captain America comic book history was at a con, and he called her up and signed that helmet without even asking for her to pay for the autograph.
Oh, yeah.
Because he was so impressed with that. When you have a piece like that, and for that to be something that she wore to her first con experience, and now it has that much impact and meaning in her life, that's kind of a cool thing, because she can actually say that helmet has followed her since she discovered cons and cosplay.
Although it is boxed up now, I'm sure she would definitely get it out for some other artist to sign, or Chris Evans.
Yeah, she's threatened lives over that helmet
Oh,
before. Yeah, I wouldn't mess with it.
New Orleans was also one of the cons that we started interacting with celebrity and making
Mm.
celebrity, like booking photo ops and meet and
Yeah, we
greets.
discovered what that was all about.
And that was a little different too, because I recall
It's changed a
your
lot.
a whole lot. I recall that one of the reasons we wanted to go there was because you wanted to get an autograph with Norman Reedus.
Right.
So when you went to get the autograph with Norman Reedus, tell us a little bit about how that happened, what that was like, because like you said, it has changed so
Yeah.
much.
It really has. And this is kind of where I look at what cons have become, and Wizard World was responsible for these changes compared to where it started and where we are now. Walking Dead was in its third year. They may have been about to start their third season, or they might have been in the third season at this point. Norman Reedus and a couple of the other actors were doing the con circuit, and all of the Wizard World cons had these guys as part of it. And so I wanted to go. I had a DVD of the first season of The Walking Dead, and I wanted to get it autographed. And so I brought that with me, and Norman was at a table, and there was a decent line, but it wasn't like what you see now. And so I got in line. I saw the neatest thing happening. People would come up to the table, and while, yes, it did slow things down, it was still quite an experience. And they would come up to the table, and at one end of the table, there was somebody that was collecting money. You'd go up and you'd say, that you wanted an autograph or whatever, and you'd pay this person. And then you'd walk down to Norman's end of the table, and he would shake your hand, talk to you. A lot of people were bringing him gifts.
Mm-hmm.
And he would like pick them up and show them off. And there would be this brief interaction with him, but there was none of this shoving people along, trying to get them moved out of the way. So he would sign whatever it was you wanted him to sign, and then he would come out from behind the table and take a picture with you on your cell phone or on camera or whatever. The next con that we went to that he was at, they had started very strict rules where you couldn't give the talent anything, and it was you paid for a picture, you paid for an autograph, and you got whichever one you paid for. And if you paid for both, then you could do both. But the talent was not allowed to come around from the table to take a picture with you if all you paid for was an autograph. And it completely changed the experience at the cons. And while the lines did get longer as these people became more popular, they moved faster because you weren't really allowed to interact anymore.
But the downside to that is that it also limited your interaction with the celebrity that you were there to see. And as we saw at one of the cons with our youngest child when she met Carrie Fisher, it really was not that great of an experience for her because she was pushed through the line so quickly. And as a small child going through to meet Princess Leia, the woman in front of her took up pretty much all of the time, and to get back on track, they were pretty much shoving the young child through, which I think was a mistake in itself. Yes. So the next year, I think we went to Wizard World in Nashville, and I had the opportunity to meet Norman Reedus, and it was a very different interaction.
Well, if you showed him your boobs, yes, it makes it
I
very
didn't mean
different.
to. I did not mean to. It was a accident.
Wardrobe malfunction.
Okay, so anybody who cosplays knows that those happen, that you are going to lose a button, you're going to pop a bus.
At the most
something.
inopportune time possible.
It's happened. Yes, it's happened a couple of times. But the experience that you had versus the experience that I had, not just necessarily getting through the line and showing like boobs and stuff, it was totally different. I mean, I recall your line was a little bit shorter because it was.
He wasn't as popular at that
right.
point. When you went through the line at yours, they were getting slow, but he was also getting a lot more popular, and there was a lot more people in the line. But by that point, they were shuffling people along. And so you, having heard my experience meeting Norman Reedus at the New Orleans con, and then when you went to meet him and you had the experience that you had, it was kind of a letdown, I think, because you didn't get to have that really good positive interaction with him, and they were being very mercenary about, no, if you want a picture, you got to pay for a picture. If you want an autograph, you got to pay for an autograph.
Can you imagine what would have happened if I wouldn't have flashed the boobs by accident? Oh my gosh. I mean, So that was probably one. I
Hmm.
have two really memorable experiences, but that was probably one
Yeah,
of
we'll
the
save
most
the other one for
memorable.
another day.
Yeah, that was probably one of the most memorable experiences because I think the response was "Hello, Wonder Woman," and I was just like, "Oh my god!" And by the time I got to back where you were sitting, I think you or one of our friends that was with us basically like, "Are you the Wonder Woman that flashed Norman Reedus?" And I'm
Yeah,
like,
I'd already heard about it on the other side of the convention floor by the time
oh my
we
god.
got
I'm
back
like,
together
how
again.
did that happen? How did everybody know Wonder Woman flashed Norman Reedus?
We got
Good
past
news
it.
travels fast. No, we didn't.
As these cons became bigger and bigger and more people were discovering them, a lot of things did start to change. And the way that the celebrities interacted with the public was a big part of that. And they also realized that there were so many more ways that they could make money
Oh yeah.
by charging for that selfie and charging for that autograph instead of allowing the celebrities to do both. And so it really started to take away from the con experience. And by the time we got to our second con, we were starting to see the honeymoon phase was over. They were starting to rent smaller and smaller spaces and
Oh
still shove
yeah.
the same amount of people and stuff into that space. And it started to become less and less of a positive experience. It was very claustrophobic. It was always hot. And, you know, every other smaller con looks at those big cons like that and starts to build their framework around what they're seeing. So
It's a
everyone else
template.
starts doing the same kind of thing. Yeah, exactly.
It's a business model template, is what it is.
Yeah.
The venue itself, and that's one of the things that you really cannot take away from how New Orleans handled it. The first year that we went, the venue was enormous. There was plenty of space.
Yeah.
People could walk around and you could see the other people. So by the time we made it back to New Orleans the second time, several years later, my youngest child, who I think it was probably 2, 3 years later, was walking around the con floor in cosplay, and she was so eclipsed by the amount of people that were in the venue that she
Mhm.
was getting overlooked, and she had an amazing cosplay, which became almost a disappointment for her.
Yeah, it completely changed her perspective on cons because they had quite literally cut the space in half and put
Oh
just
yeah,
as much stuff in it.
if not
And
more.
because they realized we can pay less for the venue by
Mhm.
taking a smaller room and still charge the same amount and bring in the same amount of people, and it was so crowded. And when you're only, you know, you're only this
Oh
tall
yeah.
and you got a bunch of adults crowded into a space, and of course the tables are all shoved together, and she's walking around and nobody is noticing her, and
And it
nobody's
was all
coming up saying they wanted pictures with her or anything like had happened at the last event she went to.
last
And
two.
she, yeah, and she was starting to have a real issue with it. She got very upset, and
Mhm.
partway through the day, she was not interested in being there anymore. The entire experience had been just completely destroyed.
Well, and I can kind of elaborate on that. When you're in an environment and you are now below eye level, we did another pretty
Yeah.
large event in which right before the event, I had a flip flop blowout. And yes, that is exactly what I said, flip flop blowout. And I managed to break a couple of bones in one of my feet, sprained both ankles. I did massive damage to both of my feet. And I was actually wheelchair bound because that was the best way to get around. Not because I couldn't get up and move around. It was because it was just a lot more comfortable. And we knew that I would be able to be on the floor much longer in the chair. And I became very,
She
very
wasn't going to
annoyed.
miss the opportunity to wear the cosplay she had built for that one either.
Oh no. Oh no. And it was amazing. It was absolutely amazing. It worked well with the chair. God,
It
that
did.
sounds horrible.
It really did.
So there were a couple of things that I ran into is being below eyesight when we would walk up to a table and we had a friend of ours that was with us who was actually in Wonder Woman. She would kind of push me ahead a little bit and I ended up being like pushed out of the way. And I kind of got a bit of an insight as to what it was like for my youngest child at that point to be so overlooked. And I got annoyed. Oh my God, I got annoyed so bad. But the other thing that was really annoying, and God, please don't ever do this. Um, don't go take photos with the person in the wheelchair because you want to be, um,
You want to look
what's
compassionate?
Yes, because I had more people come up to me when I was kind of out and about on my own and wanting to take photos with me. And I'm like, oh, well, let me stand up. And they were like, no, 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 no. I'm like, oh my God, I am not taking another damn photo in this place just because I was so annoyed by the people who did. I'm like, I'm not confined. I do not, and I don't feel right. I'm only here because I'm an idiot and I hurt myself. Oh
Yeah, that
my
was a
God, that
really unique experience, and the
awful.
takeaways from that were pretty wild because you never realize how differently somebody in a wheelchair gets treated. So it was definitely a learning experience.
Well, it's not necessarily just in the wheelchair, because I mean that was an experience in itself, but it was also being out of the line of sight, especially in that cramped of an environment. You spend all of this time putting together this design that gets overlooked just because you were now crammed into a space and nobody is looking. They're not really paying attention
Yeah,
when they're
they're
looking.
not making eye contact, they're not
Right.
communicating. Yeah. And that's what the little one was going through at that other con, because nobody bothered to look down enough to notice that there was this cute little kid that was walking around in cosplay. It was because the organizers had shoved so much into this little space that you couldn't even interact in a human way with other people. It just became about, let's take their money and throw them in this room. And it was like being in a cattle car.
Well, that also became a situation for me to build on. Now, I do understand that a lot of the cosplays that I do at different events are not always kid friendly. But if I am in a cosplay design that is, I mean, whether it's Bellatrix, because you're surprised how many kids really, really love Bellatrix, or in Wonder Woman, or or wearing Hippolyta, I try to make a point to interact with small children because I remember the impact it had on my daughter at that one con. And honestly, her experience, if that would have been her first experience, we might not have ever gone back because I
Yeah.
mean, she was visibly not interested when she wasn't getting the interaction because I mean it's basically a big giant playground, and yes, there's people selling things and there's fun things to look at, but for a kid it's basically like Halloween without candy. It's
Well,
Halloween with
we had
buying toys.
taken her to a couple of other cons by this point,
Hmm.
and she had been treated like a little rock star.
Hmm.
And then all of a sudden she became invisible.
Yeah.
And it really completely changed the perspective on the event. And the next time a con came up, we asked her if she was interested in going, and she was very hesitant to say that she wanted to go. And it was kind of a slow lead in to get her back into it as a result of that negative experience at that one event. It's something that I think a lot of people don't understand, is that it is very possible to have a negative experience at one of these things and not really want to go and participate in it anymore.
We've talked about kid friendly and understanding if your kid is enjoying it with the previous because of the nature of the event itself. But, I think a lot of people get into this trend of taking their kids and they don't always read the signs that their kids are enjoying it or not. And for the most part, we've been very fortunate. Our daughters have both always pretty much loved it, but you do have to build something that they're going to enjoy doing, not just going to the con, but having them participate and having them get involved with preparations and different things to do while they're there.
Yeah, our first time out was a discovery experience. We went from having no scope of reference for what a con was like to being fully immersed in it. And DL's getting the rock star treatment. The kids are getting the rock star treatment. I'm discovering cosplay photography because when I went in, of course, I brought my camera with me, but I didn't go in with the intent of taking pictures of cosplayers. I didn't even really think about that going into the event. But as we went through the day, I started discovering it and realized that this was a thing and it was a lot of fun.
Mhm.
It was kind of the beginning of a hobby and a skill set that was going to eventually grow and become something where we would find ourselves being asked to come to an event specifically because I would come in and take pictures and DL would come in with these amazing cosplays. And we started finding people that were seeking us out as a result of that.
We found out that that pairing worked very well. We know some amazing cosplay photographers that we've both used in the past. I don't mind throwing a shout out to Huff Photo and Brian Huff. He's an amazing cosplay photographer. But something that's a little bit different for us is instead of having that booth set up where you're doing like the full backdrop and everything, we always go out on the floor and we're trying to get photos of cosplayers, of groups of cosplayers. And one of the things that we discovered early on is me in cosplay, a lot of times walking up to a cosplayer and going, "Hey, can we get a photo of that?" Actually, it created a sense of comfort.
Yeah.
Because sometimes it's a little uncomfortable when you're walking up to somebody that's in a costume going, and especially as a dude, I'm just, it's, can I get a picture? Do you have an OnlyFans account? Can I see your feet? Not that that's happened just once or twice.
Yeah. There's an advantage to having a partner to help you wrangle people in when it comes to doing cosplay photography. I've never been comfortable walking up to, say, young girls that are dressed in cosplay and going, "Hey, can I take your picture?" Because, just like what Dale was saying. I've become more comfortable with that, but I also have a very careful approach when I do that. But it's always easier if I've got DL there or one of our kids there with us to go up to him and go, "Hey, you want to come over here and get your picture made?" And the lead in is a lot easier with that.
Also, we've been on the con circuit locally for a little while, so at least 10, 11 years now. So people know us and they do seek us out. So that helped that they do see the photo at the other end. And a lot of times they're very, very appreciative of the nature of the images that you're capturing.
I look back at the pictures that I took at this first con when we went to New Orleans, and I kind of cringe a little bit. Some of them are good just for what they are. Like, I love the picture that I took of the oldest child in her Captain America cosplay, kind of looking over her shoulder. It's to this day, it's one of my favorite cosplay photos just because of what it represented. It was us approaching the con for the first time. We were walking up the sidewalk to go in the con, and I said, "Hey, kid," and she turned around and I took a quick picture of her. So it's not compositionally, it's not one of the greatest pictures in the world, but it has a lot of meaning for us because it kind of reflects that transition between never having gone into a con and walking through the front door of that con. So there's a lot of memory and there's a lot of meaning in that one individual shot.
Well, also, when you start going through these images and realizing this has been so many years ago and prepping for tonight's show, going back and looking at these images, of course, you kind of forget. So going back and seeing some of these were just, they were just a lot of fun. We do have the one of the youngest with Batman. It's so much fun to see how much she was loving life and how much people were appreciating her, to see all of these cool characters. And it's interesting because there's a picture of her on screen right now with Marceline, and many years later she has cosplayed Marceline. Kind of seeing all of that come full circle was a lot of fun.
Yeah, and it's also strange looking back at those pictures and remembering just how long it's been or how old some of these characters are. The Captain America character, I didn't realize how far back that movie had come out.
Oh, no.
Until I was looking at those pictures going, these cosplays are all based on the first Avenger Captain America character, and they go back that far. So yeah, it's really weird to see that, and it gives you a bit of a time reference for what was going on in the world of geekdom at that particular point. And that's part of the fun of doing cosplay photography, is going back at some point and looking at it and seeing what was really popular at the time and looking at the dates on the pictures and going, "Oh yeah, that did come out that far back." And it's just, it makes for a neat little walk down memory lane sometimes.
Well, it's also interesting for me as a cosplayer to go back and look at how all the skills have evolved, but also to look at the characters that I was cosplaying then, and how much that has changed. Not just necessarily the involvement, but so nowadays I don't do Wonder Woman so much anymore and have a tendency to lean more towards Queen Hippolyta. And I think a lot of that is as I get to be of a certain age, I try to look for characters that I can embrace pretty comfortably, because as we in the cosplay world know that sometimes people are not the most forgiving when you select a character that either you don't embody, or you are out of the age bracket, or Lord forbid something should be off on your costume. I have found that I have a tendency to gravitate towards characters that I embody, and I can pull off very comfortably without feeling like I'm out of my own realm. So
Not everybody has the ability to shut off that worrying about what other people think. While we would all love to be able to go out and do whatever, I'd love to be able to dress up as Captain America and not feel like I look like a complete dork in a Captain America costume, just because I have always loved that character. But I don't have the ability to do that and then shut off wondering what other people are thinking. So I try to, the times that I do cosplay, which is not terribly often, I try to find characters that I fit with a little bit better and find a little bit more comfortable. But if you can go out and you can cosplay something just because you love that character and that's what you want to do, then do that and have fun with it.
honestly, going into that event, we did not realize, or at least I did not realize, how deeply scrutinized cosplayers were
Yeah.
at that point. As sad as it is, this was the first environment that we were ever in that, of course, you have people who are a little bit handsy when you're in cosplay. That experience happened. But the other thing that was kind of interesting is we had somebody come up to my youngest child who was wearing the pink Batman outfit and actually comment that Batman doesn't wear pink. And I'm like, you jackass. I'm like, she's 4. I don't always have thick enough skin to deal with that type of interaction.
When it comes to cons and cosplay and whatnot, it's not a perfect environment. It's not something where you go in and there is no judgment. Everybody just loves everybody. It is a comfortable place if you consider yourself a nerd and you want to go be among other people that are like-minded. But even in a culture like that, there are trolls, there's gatekeepers, there's all kinds of different people that, for whatever reason, can't just let everybody else have fun. We've experienced it from this first con to our most recent con. There's always going to be somebody in there that wants everything to be a certain way, and they're not willing to give anybody any room when it comes to how they want to exist. I hate that it has to be that way, but I guess it's that way in any little subculture group. When you get through the doors of a con and you find that level of comfort and you find your people, especially for the first time, there's not another experience like it. And you start to understand why people are out looking for every con they can go to so that they can live that experience again. You spend the rest of the time between this con and the next one building up that cosplay, getting things together, and saving your money for all the things that you're going to buy, and then chomping at the bit for that next event to go on and get here. And I think that's half the fun of this lifestyle, is getting ready for the next event, putting together everything, calling up your friends, going, hey, who all's going to this event? And then planning what's going to happen when you get there. Yeah.
No,
we'll do a group cosplay photo when we get there.
The best way to describe that for me is almost like chasing a high. You spend this time developing, and I'll be honest with you, you give little peaks here and there, but unless you are one of these just incredible seamstresses that show the entire process, a lot of it is very secretive. You're not going to show anything but like a little glimpse here and a little glimpse there. And that was one of the things that I have always really enjoyed about building new cosplay, is that I want the whole unveiling, and I want people's initial reaction to seeing it for the first time. That is probably what I spend most of my time doing. Just about every con that I go to, for the most part, I have a new cosplay or a variation on another cosplay. There's always something in the works. And honestly, if we would not have walked into that first Wizard World in New Orleans in 2013 and had the experience, the positive experience that we had the overwhelming sense of being welcome and finding our people, we probably would have never done that again.
I wonder if our first experience had been like what we ended up with when we went back to New Orleans to go to Wizard World, if we would have been as hooked as we were because of the positive experience we had at the first one.
Well, and I'm not saying that the next time around wasn't a positive experience. the problem was is we had something to compare it to.
Yeah.
And the first experience, I think for most people, when you go into an environment like that, you kind of turn a blind eye to the things that might be wrong. There were people who had already been on the circuit for many years and they knew, watch out for cosplay creeps that are going to creep on every female in male cosplayer. Watch out for, people who are doing things that are less than kind. Be mindful that people are going to come out and make some kind of negative comment. Be aware that somebody's going to walk up from behind and take a photo of you not looking your best.
Or walk up and stick their phone under your skirt and try to take pictures. I mean, we've encountered everything.
Oh yeah. Walking to it for the first time, we didn't really think about and know all of the things that happen. With every event, there's a new set of complications that come, and cosplay is definitely one of those areas that has its own set of complications. I've always tried to be mindful because I know that I have a tendency to be very low cut. And if you're caught staring at my boobs or something, I might say something, but I'm not going to be rude about it. I've actually told the one positive Deadpool experience I had, Deadpool kept looking down and I'm like, it's okay if I didn't want them out there, they wouldn't be out there. I mean, for the most part, our experience with our first con really was overwhelmingly positive.
Yeah.
A lot of really good experience to take away. I would imagine we found really cool things to take away because that's kind of a given every time we go. We discovered that this is a lifestyle that we truly enjoyed and wanted to be part of.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we keep coming back for more.
It's an
We did
addiction.
this first outing. We had a great experience with it. The kids loved it. It kind of became something that we did as a family over the years. We'll always kind of look back on it with happy thoughts, which you don't always get to do with family vacations, and especially when it's something like this.
That's a running joke in my family's household. It's
Yeah.
like every photo of my family growing up at a family vacation, we all look so annoyed at one another and just done. And that was not the experience that we had. It was a lot of fun.
So that's it for this episode of the Concentric Podcast. I hope you've enjoyed this little walk down memory lane as we discussed our very first con experience. I think there's going to be lots more to come, and we hope that you will consider subscribing to our YouTube channel. Don't forget to click on that notification bell too, so you can be made aware of all of our upcoming videos. And we're going to try to post these regularly on Thursday evenings. They should drop at 7 o'clock Central Time. But with that said, we're going to bring this one to a close, and we'll see you on the next one.
I can't say pleasant screams. What do I say now? Holy
Wrong
crap.
show.
Is my tiara crooked? I feel like